Welcome to KO with Kyle. I'm your host, Kyle. We're going to be recapping this past weekend's UFC 252 card, and be sure to like my video and check out the previous ones if you haven't already. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Starting off the main card, we have John Dodson versus Merab Dvalishvili, and that was at Bantamweight. And John Dodson was coming in a little bit higher ranked at number 12 in the division, and Dvalishvili was number 15. I know John Dodson was worried about the wrestling going in. He said that he would have the advantage, being a little bit taller man, and being able to stop the wrestling from Dvalishvili. Right as it starts, it ties up against the cage. Merab's got him, and he's doing non-stop knees to the thighs. I've never, like Joe Rogan said, I've never seen so much damage done to the thighs in a clinch. John Dodson brushed it off in between rounds, saying that he was just hugging me. But he was really nailing him with knees to the thighs the whole time. John Dodson was just really waiting for a counter strike. He could hardly get his shots off. A lot of the fight was just going at Dvalishvili's pace and preventing the wrestling. John Dodson was really good at preventing the wrestling. A couple times he did get grabbed and slammed down to the mat, but immediately he would just switch around and get his leg out and stand right back up. So the two takedowns in two different rounds that Merab got, both of them, Dodson just immediately stood back up. So they weren't much of takedowns. There was no ground and pounds. Aljamain Sterling was in Dvalishvili's corner. I guess they trained together, and that was pretty cool to see him giving him advice in between rounds. And yeah, it was just most of the fight back and forth, but Dodson just never landing clean shots, just never getting damaging blows, never putting Dvalishvili in danger or preventing him from coming forth with his wrestling attempts. I think there's about 20 takedown attempts and 2 successful takedowns, and Dvalishvili got the one in a unanimous decision. So I had that fight going to decision, and it did. All of Dvalishvili's wins, I think he's on a 5-fight win streak, have gone to decision. So it's just kind of the story of that fighter. But moving forward, we had a fight that was replaced in the prediction or the forecast episode. I talked about Ankalaev versus Cuțelaba. That one was taken off because of a positive corona test and replaced with Herbert Burns versus Daniel Pineda at Featherweight. And Herbert Burns is the younger brother to Gilbert Burns, and his nickname is The Blaze, and Daniel Pineda's nickname is The Pit. And Pineda had last fought in the UFC, I think, in 2014. He's got a lot of fights, but they were quite a long time ago. He's now 35 years old coming into this fight. And coming into this fight also, he was 6-0 essentially in his last 6 fights. He was 4-0 with finishes and then 2 no contests. And in this guy's 26 wins, Daniel Pineda, he has a 100% finish rate. So they're always by KO or submission, or he's just always finding a way to get it done within the time limit. So really exciting fighter. And Herbert Burns was much hyped. He was the favorite going in. He was a submission specialist, a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and just a really dangerous ground game. He missed weight for this fight. He was about 4.5 pounds off the limit. I know that's about 3.5 pounds technically heavier than he was supposed to be. So Pineda got a percentage of his purse for this fight, and Herbert Burns had previously got a contract off of Dana White's Contender Series in Season 3. In this fight, it was back and forth. Pineda was throwing heavy shots. He got an early takedown, getting a little ground and pound. He ends round 1 with some ground and pound. And then in round 2, Burns gets a takedown, and he doesn't quite do the ground and pound the same way. He's just transitioning the jiu-jitsu. He's trying to get a better and better position, trying to set up for a submission. At some point, Pineda sweeps and then gets into like kind of a half guard position. He's on the ground. He gets him into the crucifix, so he's got both of his arms tied up, and then he just starts raining in elbows and strikes, some punches and some elbows onto Herbert Burns' face, and he was doing everything he could, just wriggling, trying to spring up his back and do everything to get out of the position, but he couldn't. He was just stuck, and Pineda finished the fight with the crucifix position, just raining down blows. So he got a performance of the night bonus, and really good on him. I think coming off of a big couple years time off from the cage, it's really exciting for him to get that win, and we'll see who he gets paired up against next at featherweight. And definitely not over for Herbert Burns. He's very talented. He had 2 wins coming into this that were exciting finishes, so I'm sure he'll do more in the future and hopefully make weight in the future. You don't want to see him missing weight so early on, so I'm not sure what that was about going into this one. But anyways, moving on, we had a heavyweight bout. It was between Bigi boy Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Junior Chigano dos Santos. And Dos Santos, I predicted him. He was the more acclaimed fighter in the past. He had been the heavyweight champ, defended it. He had gone to many championship rounds with a lot of different guys, and it was real tentative on the feet. Dos Santos was throwing a little bit to the body. Rozenstruik was countering, so they didn't want to get in too much exchanges. Dos Santos started throwing some kicks. Jairzinho caught one of them and then started really going after him. He was trying to finish it, but just couldn't find the blows. And in round 2, Jairzinho had the octagon control. He's kind of forcing Dos Santos to kind of circle around and circle out, and he was landing some straight rights. Dos Santos was landing some straight rights. And then Jairzinho's backs Dos Santos against the cage and just gets like this 1-2 combination of an uppercut and an overhand right, and it just dazed him. He fell down, he swarmed him, landed some more shots, and then the ref stepped in to stop it. And it was a TKO from Rozenstruik. It was real tentative the whole fight. It was back and forth, pretty close. I thought Dos Santos did pretty well. It was just when he got backed up against the cage and got a couple shots unanswered that were just enough. Just takes 1-2 shots, that's it, and knocks you out. So Jairzinho continues his streak of knocking guys out, and his only loss was against Ngannou, so we'll see what's next from him. But he's a big contender. I'd love to see him against Derek Lewis, who just won a fight night recently. That would be an amazing matchup, and I'm sure to see a KO in that one. But I don't want to play matchmaker too much. Just move on to the co-main event, which was Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera. O'Malley was coming in with a height advantage of 3 inches and a 1.5 inch reach advantage. And when the fight started, it was a lot of like fakes and footwork from O'Malley. Who's trading some, they were calling him push kicks. I think Dominic Cruz was calling him push kicks, but they're just kind of like straight kicks to the body, trying to establish distance, and they were trading some kicks back and forth. O'Malley was mainly kicking at the beginning of the fight. He was switching stances a lot, throwing a couple body kicks. I've seen a lot of people talk about online about 254 remaining in the first round. Chito Vera throws a leg kick, and when O'Malley puts his foot back down to plant it, he kind of does a foot fail for the first time, and he starts to have foot problems. Maybe it was because of that Chito Vera kick at 254. I'm not certain. It could just be some prior injury before this fight. But Chito controls the octagon once he kind of sees that O'Malley's hurt a little bit. O'Malley tries to step in, and it looks like he breaks his foot or something. It rolls over, his toes go under, and the top of his foot rolls over the top. And with about 2 minutes left in round 1, and it looked like he damaged it really bad. He tried to play it off like he wasn't hurt. He tried to still move around a little bit, but it was just kind of like a back and forth, limited range, limited mobility. And Chito starts pressuring him with kicks. He was being real safe, and measured as he came in, just throwing kicks at the body, kicks at the legs. O'Malley like tried a spinning back fist. He was trying a Hail Mary like KO flurry at one point, but then when he missed and didn't get the KO, he tried to step back on that foot and it failed, and he fell back to the ground, and Chito gets on top, swarms him, and lands an insane elbow, and it just about knocks him out. The first elbow really cracked him, and then he landed about maybe 1.5 and a punch, 1.5 more elbows and a punch after that, and Herb Dean stopped it. It was kind of an early stoppage, but it was definitely over for O'Malley. He was screaming in pain after the fight because of his leg injury. I don't know if it was a knee or a foot, a broken foot maybe in the past was showing back up again, but definitely something happened with his foot and his mobility was limited. So it was a win for Marlon Vera. He swarmed him. It was a big derail of the hype train of Sean O'Malley coming in undefeated to this one. 2020's been a pretty tough year for undefeated fighters, and then we have Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa, and both of them are undefeated, so one of them is going to lose their undefeated status coming soon. So it's a tough year. We'll see Khabib versus Gaethje too, if you want to talk about undefeated status. Who knows? There's a lot on the line, but it's not over for Sean O'Malley. I'm sure he'll need time to recover from whatever the injury was. I'm not sure what it was yet, but it was a big win for Chito Vera, so congratulations to him. Moving on to the main event, it was the legends, the two best at heavyweight, Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier. Stipe was landing early. DC went to his wrestling and got a takedown in round one. He was up in a headlock against the cage. There was an eye poke from DC. It wasn't too bad, but it's just people online had been talking about the eye poke controversy coming into this. DC ends up getting a terrible eye poke at the end of round 3, which pretty much injures him and ends the fight. But it continued for the whole 5 rounds. Stipe was just landing with to the head and to the body. At the end of round 1, DC rocks Stipe with about 10 seconds left, so I could see scoring round 1 for DC just because of at the very end of the round he really rocks Stipe, and it's the hardest punch of the round. But previous to that, Stipe had been out punching him for that round, so I think maybe 2 of the judges scored it for Stipe and 1 of them scored it for DC. And then moving on to round 2, there were some exchanges with DC landing some bombs but missing. A big right by Stipe, and around 2, Stipe's on top and flurrying. And then in round 3, Stipe starts mixing in some body shots like he was having some success with in the second fight. They get tied up against the cage. Stipe does like a spinning back fist on the break, and Stipe's just kind of throwing more. I gave rounds 2 and 3 to Stipe, and he was just having more output, but then he did the eye poke at the end of round 3, so going into round 4, it was just looking really bad for DC. His vision was bad. He was landing, but he wasn't wrestling. I don't know why. Just the first round he did some wrestling, and then the rest of the fight it was just trading on the feet. So I don't know. DC, I guess, said in an interview that the wrestling wasn't there, or else he would have utilized it more. But I think he's just such an accomplished wrestler that he probably could have forced the issue a little bit more with Stipe in this fight and prevented some of the just trading back and forth on the feet with someone who's so durable like Stipe. And round 4 is a back and forth, each of them controlling the center of the octagon some. I kind of scored it for DC personally. I think he maybe put it on a little bit more in the 4th round. And then in the 5th round, Stipe's clinching DC against the cage, trading right hands. DC stuffed all the takedown attempts. I think there was like 6 takedown attempts from Stipe. There's 60 seconds left in the clinch. They're trading blows. Stipe's holding DC against the cage at the end of the fight. So they gave it 3 rounds to 2, or a couple of judges gave it 4 rounds to 1 for Stipe, but I gave it 3 rounds to 2 for Stipe. But it was a great win for him. Definitely goes down as the greatest heavyweight to ever do it. Defended the belt the most times. Defended it against the best competition in Cormier and Ngannou and Overeem and Verdum. And Stipe is just the man, so congratulations to him. And before I let you guys go, I'll talk about the prelims a little bit because there was some interesting stuff, so I'll try to just go through it pretty quickly. But there were in this strawweight bout between Ashley Yoder versus Lívia Souza, and it was back and forth. Yoder was trying to establish like a kickboxing distance. She tried to go for the back in round 1, ended up on her back going for an armbar attempt, and Souza was getting in some ground and pound. And then round 2, some more kicks from the distance from Yoder. They were clinching against the cage a little bit. And round 3, Yoder really found the kickboxing range and doing a lot of kicks and just sliding away from strikes. And she did pretty well. In my book, she won, but the judges gave it to Souza, a unanimous decision. Yoder outstruck her all 3 rounds, but one judge scored it 30-27 for Souza, so I don't know how that's possible, but it was just some bad judging in that one. Moving on, there was a men's featherweight bout between TJ Downtown Brown and Danny, the Colombian warrior Chavez, in his UFC debut. They were respecting each other's power early on. Chavez got a knockdown with a calf kick, which I always love. He was getting a lot of counter blows. In round 2, Brown's shin really swelled up because of all the calf kicks. And then in round 3, Brown was landing a little bit more, but Chavez switched over to the wrestling and got a couple takedowns to submit the decision victory for Brown, for Danny Chavez. So moving on to the strawweight bout in the female fight was Felice Herrig versus Virna. Jandiroba, I think is how they were pronouncing it. And this one was a fearsome bout. It was just an immediate takedown from Jandiroba. Good ground pressure. She was immediately transitioning. She goes for the back, gets the mount in transition, rains some blows, and then grabs one of the arms and transitions to an armbar. So it was a dominant performance. It was a performance of the night bonus. And Jandiroba, will definitely see more from her at strawweight. She's a fearsome contender, and that was a fierce finish. And in the final prelim fight was Jim Miller, who is coming in, getting the most fights ever in UFC with this fight, versus Vince from Hell Pichel. And it was a back and forth. Miller got a takedown in round 1. He was working for Pichel's back, working for like a Peruvian necktie. He kind of gave up on that and went in for like a calf slicer attempt with about 10 seconds left in the round. And in round 2, Pichel had some ground control. He ended up on top of round 2. In round 3, Pichel gets an immediate takedown. He's punching and taking the back. At one point, Jim Miller's on top. They're wrestling against the cage with 2 minutes left. Knees and kicks from Pichel. A guillotine attempt as like a Hail Mary from Miller at the end, but he's on his back. And he just couldn't quite secure it. So it went to a decision and went to Vince from Hell Pichel. And then in the early prelims, there was a heavyweight fight. It was Chris Dockhouse who was coming in as the favorite versus Parker Porter. And Parker Porter was a big old boy. He had to cut down to 265. He had about the thickest thighs I've ever seen in UFC. I don't know how they even made trunks big enough for him. He was constantly like trying to adjust the trunks and pull down on them. In this one, Chris Dockhouse was just the faster, more accurate fighter. He had an accurate right hand. He caught Porter at one point and then followed up with a knee, which was legal, but kneed him and about knocked him out. It was a TKO victory for Dockhouse. And then in the final fight on the early prelims, it ended up being the fight of the night, actually. It was between the favorite, the Hawaiian Kai Kamaka at featherweight versus Tony Kelly. And this one was a back and forth. Kai Kamaka was more of a traditional boxer, but Tony Kelly was throwing a lot of straight rights and then leg kicks. There was some knees thrown. Kanako went for a single leg and then got it, like lifted the leg all the way high up and went to the high leg takedown. Kelly's right back up in round 2. Kai Kamako was controlling the center of the octagon, and there was some wrestling from Kelly and some flurries on the breaks, and then in round 3, Tony Kelly comes out strong, some elbows and some knees. He goes for a guillotine, ends up in his back, and Kelly was trying to tie up in the clinch, and it went from a unanimous decision for Kai Kamaka, but it was a good bout back and forth. So that was the final one. And that's all for this episode of KO with Kyle. We recapped 252. There's some interesting fights coming up next. There will be a fight night between Pedro Munoz and Frankie Edgar, which I will be doing a forecast for pretty soon. So this was my first video episode, so I hope you enjoyed the format change. And please follow us again, like I said at the beginning. Like this video if you liked it, comment, and check out my previous videos. So thank you guys so much, and I will see you later. Peace.